Alright, let's dive into something that's been sparking a lot of debate lately, the Australian census and the question of identity, specifically for Hongkongers. Here's the deal, this week, millions of Australians are filling out their census, and for many, it's more than just a bureaucratic chore. It's a moment to assert who they are, where they come from, and how they see themselves. But for Hongkongers like Kevin Yam, it's a moment of frustration. So here's the hook. Kevin, an Australian citizen born in Hong Kong, wants to write Hongkonger under the ancestry question. Seems straightforward, right? Wrong. The Australian Bureau of Statistics, ABS, doesn't recognize Hongkonger as a distinct ancestry category. Instead, it gets coded as Chinese. And this, my friends, is where things get really interesting. Personally, I think this issue goes way beyond just a checkbox on a form. It's about identity, politics, and how governments, even unintentionally, can erase cultural distinctions. Hong Kong, as many of you know, has a unique history. It was a British colony for over 150 years, handed back to China in 1997 under the One Country, Two Systems framework. But here's the thing, Hongkongers don't just see themselves as Chinese. They have their own language, Cantonese, not Mandarin, their own writing system, traditional Chinese characters, and a distinct political and cultural identity shaped by their colonial past. What makes this really interesting is the timing. In 2019, Hong Kong saw massive protests against Beijing's encroachment on its autonomy. Since then, many Hongkongers have left, seeking refuge in places like Australia. For them, asserting their identity isn't just a personal choice, it's a political statement. When the census lumps them under Chinese, it feels like their unique struggles and experiences are being erased. From my perspective, this raises a deeper question. How do we define identity in a globalized world? Is it solely determined by geography, or does culture, language, and history play a role? The ABS argues that there are other questions, like country of birth or language spoken at home, that capture this diversity. But activists like Jane Poon counter that it's not the same. She's a third-generation Hongkonger, and for her, this isn't just about data, it's about recognition. We treasure our own identities, she says, and we hope others acknowledge them, not just impose a Chinese identity over us. One thing that immediately stands out is the broader implications of this issue. It's not just about Hongkongers. The census also affects other communities, like the Uyghurs and Tibetans, who are similarly fighting to preserve their distinct identities in the face of Chinese government policies. Ramala Chanashev, a Uyghur advocate, points out that the recent ethnic unity and progress promotion law in China has made it even more critical for these communities to be recognized as separate entities. If the census doesn't capture this, how can governments address their specific needs? What many people don't realize is that the census isn't a static document. It evolves. The ABS has added new categories like Israeli and Edo, and relabeled others, like Uyghur instead of Uyghur. But the omission of Hongkonger feels like a missed opportunity. Ted Hui, a former Hong Kong politician now living in Australia, puts it bluntly, we haven't lived in Beijing's political propaganda all our lives, so we have more independent thinking. That's what makes us Hongkongers. If you take a step back and think about it, this debate reflects a larger global trend, the tension between national identities and subnational or cultural identities. Catalonia in Spain, Scotland in the UK, and Quebec in Canada, these are all places where people are fighting for recognition that goes beyond the borders of their nation-states. The census, in this context, becomes a battleground for visibility and legitimacy. A detail I find fascinating is the ABS reasoning for not including China as a tick-box option under the country of birth question. They say it's to encourage more specific answers, like Hong Kong or Macau. But this feels inconsistent. If they're willing to differentiate between these regions there, why not under ancestry? It's a small detail, but it suggests a broader lack of nuance in how these identities are being handled. What this really suggests is that identity is messy, and categorizing it is even messier. The census is meant to be a tool for understanding a population, but when it fails to reflect how people see themselves, it becomes part of the problem. Personally, I think the ABS could take a leaf out of Canada's book. Their census allows for more open-ended responses, giving people the freedom to self-identify in ways that feel authentic to them. This raises a deeper question: are we doing enough to ensure that everyone feels seen and heard in these official processes? Or are we inadvertently perpetuating systems that marginalize certain groups? For Hongkongers, this isn't just about a word on a form, it's about their right to define themselves on their own terms. So here's my closing thought: identity isn't something that can be neatly boxed into categories. It's fluid, complex, and deeply personal. The census as it stands might not fully capture that, but the conversations it's sparking are crucial. Maybe, just maybe, this debate will push us to rethink how we measure and acknowledge diversity in the first place. What do you think? Should the census adapt to reflect these nuances, or is it too complicated to get right? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to hear your take.